During this pandemic, I think it's pretty common for us to suppress our emotions. You've got a lot of pent-up anxiety. We have that, it's fine kind of mindset. Well, let's talk about that. Is that healthy? I'm joined now by Eric Rittmeyer once again, who is a former Marine, and he is an emotional expert, actually a mental toughness expert, and we're going to talk to him about that it's fine mentality. And then later on, we're going to get into the conversation about really good political conversations. But first, okay, let's talk about that. Eric, when people put themselves in the frame of mind of, I'm okay, it's fine, sometimes that's not healthy, is it?
It's really not, John. It goes back to like when we were kids, right? If you remember your parents telling you this, don't hold in your sneeze, your lungs are going to collapse. It's the same thing when it comes to emotions. Unfortunately, as kids, we're not taught how to express the emotion. We're taught to suppress it, to hold it in. So what we have now is a society of people who are just getting in situations where they don't know how to respond. And instead of responding, they react, which is emotion-based. They go off the deep end. They get upset at the littlest things.
Yeah, and I don't think this is exclusive to men. I think women are included in this too when we say, you know what, if I show or if I express my emotions, I'm considered weak. And that's certainly not healthy, is it?
It's really not, and we're all emotional creatures, right? We're hardwired to feel first and think later. So regardless of gender, male or female, we all have these feelings. And the issue is what we have to especially let our kids know is 100% of the feelings that we have are okay. It's how we respond to those feelings that's so important. Again, we're given no training on this. So especially boys, males, we have a society that if you show any type of emotion, that's you being weak. And that's very, very dangerous. And it's creating a bunch of people that are not knowing how to express anything other than anger and aggression and just being mean.
So if we want to express our emotions, what's a healthy way to do that? Should you talk to a friend? Can you journal and write things down? What do you recommend?
Well, there's a few things, John. The first thing is to acknowledge the fact that we're going to have an emotion-based reaction. Every time we communicate with somebody, we're going to react emotionally. So we have to remain in control of the emotion. If we're aware of it, if we know it's there, then we can understand when somebody says something we don't like. Our triggers, right? We all have these triggers. If we can be mentally prepared for these triggers, so when somebody says it, we now know, okay, flag goes up, that's a trigger. What's getting ready to happen right now is going to be an emotion-based reaction as opposed to processing it logically, which would be a response. We have to be aware of the emotion and remain in control of it.
So if we suppress our emotions, and I think we're all guilty of that at times, what are some of the repercussions for that? Maybe some of the negative things that can possibly happen, Eric?
Yeah, there's lots. I mean, the biggest thing I think, John, is just we shut down at that point. We're incapable of hearing anybody else. We're horrible listeners. And again, it gets to a point where it's a fever pitch, right? So it's like that layering. Any one thing individually is not that big of a deal, but when just layers and layers and layers, all of a sudden something happens and it boils over. And that's where we are right now. On top of the social media, we're more about social media right now than we are social interaction. It's just a combination of a whole bunch of bad stuff all together. It just makes it boil over.
Everything you say makes perfect sense, Eric. So where do we start? Okay, you're at home, it's the pandemic, you're not able to socialize as much. It's harder to talk to a friend. As you said, we tend to lean on social media. So to get out those pent-up emotions, to get out some of this anxiety, where do you recommend we start? What do we do?
What I recommend is we communicate, we talk to others, because again, I hear this, everybody says we're all in the same boat, and I don't agree with that. What I say is we're all in the same storm, but the boat we're in is individualized. Some of us came into this pandemic on a 50-foot yacht with a full-blown staff. Other people came in on a 7-foot inflatable with a hole in it. So mentally, we were all in different places when we came into this pandemic. So to say we're all in the same boat is not fair, but I believe it all starts with communicating, reaching out to people that we love, that we care. Our older population that might have some sort of cognitive issues, or they don't have the technology to be able to pick up FaceTime, but it's all about communicating and realizing that we're all in the same storm together. Let's help each other, let's love each other, and let's guide each other through this together.
You talk about loving each other. I think the combination of the pandemic and some of the political issues that are front and center today have really made this divide very deep, this divide that is very wide. Do you find that the majority of emotions that you're dealing with now when you help people professionally, is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it a combination of both?
It's all of that, John, but the one thing that's consistent, I would say, it's fabricated. It's like, this is the outrage culture. When I try to get the core of what really upsets people, they don't really know. It's assumptions that are made. Just that, the person next to me, because they disagree with me, I have to dislike them. I have to be confrontational with them. So a lot of the anger, a lot of the issues we deal with right now aren't rooted in anything factual. It's just they feel like they need to be mad because they don't agree with people. It's a horrible situation.
Okay, I'm going to make you really work here in the next segment, because in the next segment we're going to talk about political conversations. And with the inauguration being tomorrow, I think all of us are going to encounter a friend, maybe someone who's not so friendly, maybe a coworker, and they're going to want to be confrontational. They're going to be a little bit angry. They're going to be very opinionated. So coming up here in the next segment, we're going to talk about how to handle that. Before we do that, tell folks, if they'd like to get your book, where can they attain it?
I appreciate it, John. Thank you so much. My website's best. It's mentaltoughnessspeaker.com. You can also go to my direct book website, which is emotionalmarine.com, and I'm all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, catch and hate on Twitter. I'm all over the place. Thank you for that.
No, I appreciate that. Again, former Marine, hoorah. And we'll get I'm going to get your expertise here. We're going to really test you because, yes, we're going to talk about political conversations, how to handle them, how to keep your emotions in check. That's next on Wave 3 Listens Live. Welcome back. We are rejoined once again by Eric Rittmeyer. Eric Rittmeyer is the author of The Emotional Marine, and he is a mental toughness expert. And here we go. We're going to introduce the topic of how to keep it civil when having a political conversation or debate. Eric, I'm assuming that it all begins with respect. Is that true?
It is. It does begin with respect. But, even more importantly than that, John, it begins with acknowledging that we're emotional creatures and knowing that as a nation we're intoxicated in emotion right now. Logic and emotion are inversely related. So as one goes up, the other goes down. Once you get to a point where you're so overcome with emotion, you're incapable of thinking logically and acting logically. Right now, our nation is heavily intoxicated in emotion. We're just totally incapable of seeing and accepting things that we don't agree with, and that's a problem.
Yeah, Eric, it seems like more than ever, and you being a former Marine, you would understand this, that more than ever, there seems to be just more, everyone's more combative, a little more venom involved in the conversation. What is that due to? Without taking political sides, does the pandemic, I guess, kind of add fuel to the fire and everyone's a little bit more angry and, as we talked about before, pent-up emotions are all getting thrown out there? Is that about how it works?
I would agree with that. I would say, this starts with the ability to what I refer to as suspending our disbeliefs. And the problem is, as a society, we've gotten to the point where we're incapable of hearing opposing points of view. So when we suspend our disbeliefs, what we do is we set aside whatever it is that we feel, that we believe to be true, and we give that other person the ability to express where they're coming from, keeping our beliefs aside. So we have to get better. We have to get better at being listeners. We listen with the intent to reply, not with the intent to understand. But if we can set aside our beliefs to hear that person out, at the end of the day, we just want them to feel like they've been heard. We don't have to agree. We just want them to feel like they've been heard and understood. So
it's good to take a deep breath, perhaps bite your tongue a little bit. Let's talk about possible triggers, maybe points of conversation we should all stay away from. Can you talk about that a little bit, Eric?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out two of the biggest words in my language, okay? Don't ask me to spell them, John. I can't spell them. I can tell you what they mean. Systematic desensitization. Systematic desensitization. So in the military, what we do is we train. We desensitize our brain to whatever it is. We put ourselves in the same situation over and over and over again. So our brain's response to it now is, okay, been here, done that. When it comes to triggers, what we do is in our mind, we play these triggers through. So when we're put in a situation where somebody pulls that lever, we've already been there. So now what we're able to do is respond, which is going to be logic-based, as opposed to react, which is emotion-based. So it's all about running it through your mind. So when you hear it, when you're in the situation, it's not the first time you've experienced it.
Interesting. Okay. We've been taught from a very young age, be respectful, and we all try to do that, but we've also been taught to speak your mind. So maybe you can give us some tips on how to be able to accomplish both of those.
Yeah, and there's a fine balance there, because what we have to do is we want to speak our mind. We're not going to sit there and be a lay down. But a very big part of emotional intelligence is, number one, self-awareness, but number two, self-regulation. So it's critically important for us to realize, and for our kids especially, every word, every action, everything we say, everything we do has an impact on other people. So the self-awareness piece is realizing that we're aware of our emotions, we're aware of what we're doing, but it's also being aware of other people's emotions. Then when it comes to the regulation piece, it's holding that back. It's holding it in. And at the end of the day, what do you have to gain by it? And if you're in these situations where you know it's going to be fueled in emotion, once you can acknowledge it's emotional, then at that point you can step back and be like, okay, I need to look at this logically. I need to go back to what I've already run through my mind. I'm not going to say something and do something that's going to upset this person. I'm going to back off and just Hakuna Matata, right?
There you go, Hakuna Matata. Now you use some Marine lingo when you talk about don't let your emotions get hijacked. Don't let your emotions get hijacked. So I mentioned, you know, the common one is always take a deep breath. When you feel your emotions starting to, or you've been triggered to start getting a little bit more combative, how can you stop that, Eric? Give us some more tips on how to control your emotions.
Yeah, and I think the emphasis there, John, is the stop word, which that's not what we need to do. We just have to control. And as a society, again, we've gotten to the point where we think we have to turn off emotion or ignore it. We don't. We have to learn how to control it. And that's what hijacking emotions is all about. We have zero input on what happens around us. We have no control over that. What we do have total control over is how we respond to it, how we react to it, how we process that. We have total control over our thoughts. So we allow somebody to hijack our emotions. They totally take control of us at that point, and they guide us wherever they want us to go, because we're fueled in emotion. So we can't even stop it at that point. So it's not trying to stop the emotion. It's acknowledging it and learning how to control it.
Now, as a former Marine, you've been trained, hey, when it's time to go to battle, go to battle. But I think if you have a friend or a coworker who seems to be a little bit more opinionated than others, is there a time, Eric, when the proper thing to do is just walk away?
There absolutely is. I get that question quite often. You know, people are like, at what point do you pull the plug? At what point do you go? At some point, you do need to do that. Unfortunately, in a perfect world, what we would do is we'd say, okay, let's have a conversation here. Let's talk about what you feel. Let's talk about what I feel. Okay, sounds good. We disagree. How about the football game tonight? It doesn't work that way all the time. So there is a point where you do have to walk away. Obviously, now social media makes that very, very difficult to do because it's 24/7. When you and I were kids, John, what do? We wrote letters, or we did what we did. We saw each other in school. We went out back. We fought. And we were done. It was over with. Now it's 24/7, especially for our kids. They can't get away from it. So it's just day and night constantly being bombarded by it. At some point, you do have to step away.
Yeah, Eric, I'm curious, when you train executives, and I'm assuming, when I say as executives, I think it's safe to assume that the majority of those folks are A-type personalities and very opinionated. How do you dial that back when you're training them on controlling their emotions and keeping their emotions in check? How do you dial that back a little bit?
Yeah, I think the eye-opening thing really is when a lot of those type of higher level, and not just higher level, everybody in general, once they start to realize that their actions and their words have impacts on other people, that's what I see the biggest light bulb go off. You know, they're normally pretty much in control of what they're doing. They're pretty much in control of their emotions for the most part, but they don't really realize the impact that their actions are having on other people. The empathy piece is another big part of this, especially for my high-level performers. A lot of them are very lacking in empathy. They don't grasp the fact that other people experience pain, other people go through hard times. They have a very difficult time associating with that. But ultimately, once you start with learning how to control the emotion and acknowledge the emotion, everything after that makes a whole bunch more sense.
For those who may right now be a little bit sad or perhaps even angry about the political situation we find ourselves in and the atmosphere we find ourselves in, what do you recommend to kind of remedy that? I know a lot of people say, well, get out and exercise, or we've talked a lot about, you know, conversations with friends. What do you recommend for, you know, clients of yours who say, I am so full of this anger or this sadness? What do you tell them to do, Eric?
I tell them to go back to the roots and really sit down and think about it for a second. And again, realize that we're all hardwired the same exact way. We're just different, you know, core psychological blueprints here. We all want kindness, compassion. We love each other. Innately, we love each other. There's this fueled up, emotional, anger-driven society right now that when you really peel everything back, we have so much more in common than we have different. So the key there would be try to find the things that you have in common as opposed to focusing so much on what's different, and don't allow yourself to get so upset about something you have zero control over. We can't control what happens. take control of your emotions and love the person next to you. It's a simple equation.
All right, Eric Rittmeyer, I'm going to put you in a scenario here, all right? So regardless if you're Republican, if you're Democrat, doesn't matter. You are the man in charge. You are the president of the United States. Tomorrow you're being inaugurated. What is your first step in bridging the divide? What would you do to bring people together in America?
I would try to make it very known. I would put a lot of emphasis on what we have together. There's no more social fabric in our country, John. There's no thread that brings us all together. We have to find that thread, whatever it is, and this is horrible to say, but you think about any time we have these catastrophic events like these major terror attacks, even this pandemic, that normally would unite people because there's a common thread there. As a nation, we've lost that social fabric to where we're all going a million different directions. So the next president of the United States needs to put a lot of effort into focusing on the things that we have in common. It used to be religion. That's now gone. There needs to be a common social fabric because right now, nobody feels like they have anything in common. We're just all going a million different directions with no core thread.
Eric Rittmeyer, you have supplied us with some solid advice. Thank you very much. Once again, for folks who would like to get a hold of your book, tell them where to go.
You're the man, John. Thank you. My website's best, mentaltoughness.speaker.com, or directly to my book website, which is emotionalmarine.com. I really appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Eric Rittmeyer, we're going to make you a regular on the show because, you know, not only are you full of good information, very knowledgeable, but you're also the voice of positivity, and I appreciate that.
I appreciate that, John. As long as you bring Papa John's and I'm good to go with the stuffed crust, count me in.
We got pizza coming your way. We'll have it delivered.
That's good. Thanks, John. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Once again, Eric Rittmeyer. All right, coming up here, we're going to talk about